Hi, Judy. We are live. So
Hey,
welcome to the Onward podcast.
it's so exciting to be here after hearing all your amazing guests. I can't believe I'm really here.
Oh, well, I can. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. I mean, I love the title that you selected for this multi-million-dollar mistake to micro engagement Maven and discovering the joy, the key to joy in entrepreneurship. And I think your mistake was in the area of sales, which is something that, I think a lot of us are like, I don't know about sales. So I'm looking forward to learning from you.
Well, I'm looking forward to sharing where I am on the journey. I wish I could tell you I had it all nailed down. What I can tell you is a little bit about the journey I was on and the couple of turning points that were a really big, hairy deal and made all the difference.
Okay, awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing it because, the Onward podcast, sometimes people are like, well, I didn't have a severe adversity, and I don't want to compare adversities one to another. I mean, there's all different kinds of adversities that we have in life, and yours is something that I think a lot of us can relate to, which is, the kind of being a little nervous about sales. So you don't have that anymore, though, right?
Every day. it's just like when you hear people talk about public speaking and you hear people who are really, really good at public speaking or actors say that if you're not getting the butterflies, then you've really lost it. It's not even a question of butterflies. I wish I could say, oh, I've nailed it. I never make mistakes in sales anymore. I make 3 or 4 a week at least. Often in conversations, I'm wishing really I hadn't been kind of off. And being willing and aware of the idea that there's almost never such thing as a perfect sales conversation in the same way as human beings. When was the last time, do we ever grade our conversations as human beings?
Yeah.
Did you ever finish a conversation with someone and hang up the phone and go, wow, that was a perfect conversation?
No. Or a podcast interview.
Oh, thanks.
Pressure's on. Let's make this one the perfect one. Oh no. So you work in the government contracting arena. You're a consultant, right? And you help people figure out how to win government contracts. And the big thing that sticks out about you with me is you talk about how when you deal with the government, you're dealing with a person, just reminding people of that. And the key is relationships. I really like that.
And that was the very essence of how we met. When you were in your last job as director of small business programs for the Navy, you and I connected as people. It wasn't just, oh, I was running a program for the National Veteran Small Business Coalition and I needed a speaker from an agency. I got to meet you and I got to know you and we got to be friends.
Yes.
And even though you were just about to head into a career transition, we stayed friends.
Mm-hmm.
And that experience of meeting people and getting to know them and getting to be friends, that doesn't sound too awful, is it? We've really enjoyed getting to know each other, and I can hardly wait for whatever adventures we have ahead. Now, you can't necessarily expect to be going on adventures with your federal contracting clients and buddies, but sometimes you never know where life takes you. And thinking about people that you meet in business, rather than thinking of them as prospects, just taking a step back and say, hey, I'm dealing with another human being. That's revolutionary for a lot of people in the government contracting realm. And that's my professional swim lane. And so a lot of the things that I've discovered in my adventure in what I call the heart of darkness of federal sales probably are just as relevant to anybody in any kind of job that involves sales. But the federal happens to be where I live. And in the same way as with any business, pretty much, if you say, I sell to everybody or everybody needs what I do, well, the advice I give my clients is focus or go broke. So federal happens to be the swim lane I'm in. And it turns out that it's a place where there's so many people that have incredible passion and ideas, innovations, and they want nothing more than to bring those things to the language that comes out of their mouths is federal. agencies, but really to the federal human beings who need what they do. But in order to make that difference, you run into the field of dreams myth. If you build it, they will come. Do you remember the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they don't. And so and ultimately you discover that either you as the business owner or the person who's tasked with sales, you've got to cross that bridge. You've got to embrace and master everything in what's involved in sales, which just brings up so many negative connotations for a lot of people.
Yeah. And why does it have to? I mean, I went to, I read one of Daniel Pink's books. It was like Everybody's in Sales. And I went to hear him speak about that. And he was talking about it. We're all, sales is influencing. We're influencing. I've watched my 4-year-old grandson. I'm at my son's house tonight. I've watched him influence his parents quite often,
You make a really profound point. Any of us who are saying, well, gee, I don't do sales. Lots of people say that. And the things involved in human connection, in influencing, these are things that we are built as humans to do from being tiny babies.
Yeah.
And there's a upside and a downside to that, because it also is at the root of why I and so many of us, millions of us, struggle and avoid and get really uncomfortable with the idea of sales. And when we're tiny babies, we are wired as little creatures to connect with our caregivers, to do our best to make sure that somebody's going to love us and care for us and take care of us, because our fate, if we're rejected, that's right down on Maslow's bottom of the pyramid. That's a profound survival skill. And so, but our wiring for that as humans, to fear, have a deep fear of rejection, have that visceral reaction to not doing something that will get us rejected, that's wired in as a survival response in our DNA. And shaking that off as we become adults and understand what really is a life threat and what's not,
right,
is really challenging. And that's part of it, the root of it. Let me try this.
You got a door opening and shutting.
I do.
It's okay. Don't worry about it.
I won't.
Yeah.
And when I talk to clients, I tried this as an experiment. It worked really, really well. Take a second. And when you think about the negative things about sales, what words come up for you? Just dish. What words come up? Think of all the negative things that just spring to mind as soon as someone says sales.
Salesperson.
What else?
Just trying to get me to buy something.
Keep going. Let's hear them all. I want to hear them all.
I don't know. What happens if they say no? They don't really care about me. They just want me to buy something. They don't know me. They don't know my needs. All they care about is selling something.
Right. All right. Got it. Very, very mainstream responses. Now, take a step back and think differently think about somebody that you know who has been the one who goes on the company trip to Maui, the Golden Circle, the million dollar club, the pink Cadillac. Do you know somebody that either they really are at the top of their profession in every way, in whatever industry they sell, or someone you've done business with for years? You buy something from this person, you always go back to this person. Maybe it's they offer a product or a service. Maybe it's life insurance. Maybe it's your hairdresser. Why do you that person? You always go back to them. They're your person. There's a transaction. You choose to purchase their expertise or services. Think about at least one person like that. Just tell me their qualities.
Well, I do know that my financial advisor, I met him in Southern Maryland. And
what's he like?
Edward Jones. So, and I didn't go with him right away. It took probably a couple years, but he's just very personable. He's not pushy. He knows about, different things about my family. When we have a good relationship, a good
Mhm.
bond, and I
Right.
don't feel pushy. I
Yeah.
feel like
What do you like about he offers financial services? What do you like about him? Why did you pick
he
him?
cares. He cares.
Mhm. Uh-huh.
And that's clear because of some of the ways he explains things. He's not trying to pull the wool over my eyes. He
Uh-huh.
explains and he asks questions, and he
Uh-huh.
doesn't want me to just take it on faith. He
Uh-huh.
explains things. Yeah. And he's
What
just
does
very personable. It makes you feel at ease.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I see you smile.
Yeah.
I just feel the warmth that you
Yeah.
have when you just think of him, you picture him in your mind's eye, your whole body relaxes. You go,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to spend time with him.
Right. Hmm.
That experience. I love the quote from Dr. Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
Hmm.
And to be able to give somebody the experience you just described, to be able to listen, explain something, not be in a hurry. That
Yeah.
person took their time. It was going to take them 2 years. It was going to take them 2 years. But are you probably ever going to change financial advisors?
No.
No, that's right. They have had all the time in the world to get to know you. And that's a really deep human connection. And that is really the essence of what sales is all about and what most of us never think of up front, do we?
No. And Jose he said pushy. And then he said, I love that he provides value and assists in providing your needs. Yeah. And Jeannie said, I love that quote. Yep. It's so true. You never forget how people make you feel. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And in the sales has a lot of different things going on. And sometimes the objectives of sales kind of crash into each other. As business owners, tell me if this feels familiar. You have expertise, but I wish we could stop using this phrase, you eat what you kill. Nobody's killing anyone in sales. And yet the idea, that there are consequences. You can have all the goals you like, but depending on your personal situation and how many employees you have, what your income sources are, there's a lot at stake when you contemplate, what if I don't close the sale? What if this person doesn't buy from me? What if that person doesn't buy from me? The possible outcomes, a possible negative outcome is so loaded in our heads with, between everything from, it's one thing to fail at Sudoku. It's another thing to fail to achieve your goal in a conversation with another human. You get to fail in public. You get to, if your mental wiring lets you, you can decide that you're humiliated. You can feel threatened that, oh, good, there's another source of income that's not coming. That can threaten everything from the feeling of domestic bliss if someone in your household was counting on a vacation or assistance for college, to longer term retirement, to paying your bills, to paying your employees. That's a lot of stuff hanging on a yes or a no, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so somehow the idea that, just relax, really? On what planet? It's really not. It's not just a game of mindset and flipping a switch. And it's everything about sale. I had all of those negative attitudes about sales when I came out of business school. I wanted to be a strategist. Just like so many of the folks in government contracting and lots of business owners, we want to share our expertise. We want to help people. And
Yeah.
we could do that all day long. The selling, could somebody please do that for me?
Right.
And could somebody please just line up needy people and I'll serve them?
Right.
Funny how that doesn't happen. And so we disconnect the idea of service from engagement when looking at it another way. What if all the things involved in sales and marketing, that's wooing in very human connection terms. And we know how to do that, to smile for the stranger, giggle, see if we can get a cookie, These are, I mean, I'll have to joke that I was speaking in public from the point where I got wandered off from the family picnic and got lost in Gage Park, and my parents found me trying to talk to little old ladies who were probably younger than I am now out of their sandwiches. And so just talking to people and relaxing in getting to know them, that can seem like the last thing on your mind when the big objective you got in mind is sell, 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 sell. And yet, setting yourself up so you've got good research, good process, you're not all over the place. You can keep showing up and be relaxed and know that if this person isn't your right person, that's okay. You've built some good prospecting around that. You can take all the time you like. One of my favorite clients, I went back because I always go back and look at the records. And I think I was involved in back and forth conversations with friend artists, and just like with your financial advisor for 2 years. Did I give up? Nope. He was involved in something very cool, 3D printing and additive manufacturing. And there's a change in the company and this and that and the other thing. And we just kept in touch. And then when the time finally came to work together, this was one of the most remarkable teams that I've ever worked with. Everybody was on the same page, and they actually renewed our engagement after we finished our 8-week program and said, we want to work with you for another 6 months. We want to work with you regularly. We want to keep building our practice, keep staying in practice using the techniques that we've learned, because the things that I'm teaching them are some of the things that I learned when, after avoiding everything to do with sales for over 25 years, I was slammed metaphorically right up against it. And I didn't have any choice, but really had to figure it out.
I want to hear about that. And Sam says, he calls it rifle shot versus shotgun. Yeah.
There's that.
Yeah.
That's one part of it. And you can afford to, I don't want to think about it in terms of hunting. My friend Will Randolph talks about hunting, fishing, farming. He's got a wonderful broadcast as well, talking about that as a big theme. And we can talk about it in those kinds of terms as well. But in building relationships, you don't make a whole conference room of people fall in love with you. You're doing business with one person at a time. And so I got out of business school. This was in 1984. And the computer industry was about on the edge of an enormous change. The PC was coming off the slab, out of the lab in Boca Raton. The face of computing was changing forever. The big excitement was Tracy Kidder's Soul of a New Machine and mini computing and the VAX. For those of us who are in IT, you're giggling. Some of us remember these things.
Yeah.
When hard drives were sort of outboard things like a toaster, and maybe. And so I was really excited out of business school to get a job working for IBM, because IBM was hiring business graduates hand over fist. They must have hired about 100 of us at IBM Canada in Toronto, where I was. And they told us I was going to get to do business strategy. I was going to help people build their businesses by harnessing the power of computing and helping them with their business strategy. It took me 6 months to figure out that I was employed by the planet's largest sales organization.
Do you think that there's a reason they didn't use the term sales, but they used business strategy?
I don't know. I was just so excited to have a job. And then I went through IBM it was basic sales training. The S was right there. Nobody hit it. And it was hard. And so I knew for sure that I didn't want to be a marketing rep, be the person on quota. The whole business about quota, the way that it was set up then, was that you got 50% of your salary, and then everything else, it was on the draw. You were borrowing from the company against future commission. And if you didn't earn your commission, then, as I understood, then you owed that money back to the company. That was really scary. I still remember being in one of the branch meetings, and the branch chief said, "There is nothing I like better than a freshly minted marketing rep with a big quota, a fat mortgage, and a new baby." And I went, ugh, how awful.
To do sales.
But there are some people. I can still picture Jim Perkins, who found that just exciting and energizing. I knew that was not me. And so at IBM, I wanted to be able to be in a company, be in a place where I could rise to the top of whatever organization that was. And the culture of IBM was all about sales. And so you look at who rose to the top in the company, and you could be the very best systems engineer you wanted to be, but the people who rose to the top, the people who were revered, the people who had all the status, were the people who were the marketing reps, who became marketing managers, who could drive quota, who could do that sales thing. Now, I've also heard people say, hey, if you couldn't find a job that you wanted at IBM, then you just didn't want to work for IBM. There were probably a lot of jobs that I could do. But being in an organization that was fundamentally a sales culture left me feeling like that wasn't my home. It wasn't going to be right for me. So I applied for jobs at the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. I wanted to be making a big difference on a big stage somewhere else, anywhere else, anything. So I kid that I was so horrified of sales that I literally left the country. All kinds. I was looking for something complete. It took me about 2 years to figure out what did I want to do. People were kind, let me do interest interviews. I got a lot of rejection letters. I really wanted to be part of a young professionals program at the World Bank. I was crushed to get that rejection letter. But somebody else suggested I file a resume and a cover letter at the Canadian Embassy in Washington, D.C. And I did that, and I interviewed, and I failed. And I went down and I filed paperwork for another position, and that got filled internally. By the time they got around to the third try, I'd figured out how the interview system worked. And I knew that they were going to ask all these questions, and I needed to be able to basically set them up and knock them down. Do you do this? Yes, I can do this. Have you got experience doing that? Yes, I do. Sort of like an RFP. Yeah. Funny, the structure of government stuff. And so I had managed to go and do just enough research at the last minute, talking to somebody who had worked elsewhere in that part of the Canadian government, and memorized just enough stuff to blow the doors off the interview board and ace the interview. It took me years to relearn all the stuff that I memorized just long enough to get the interview. But in 1987, suddenly in the fund of 1987, had a job offer at the Canadian Embassy in Washington, D.C. at the Trade Commissioner Service. And so I left my home, my native land, my family, the computer industry, packed up everything, and got married. And because I was also in a relationship that was heading in that direction, and we'd gotten engaged without either of us knowing who was moving north and who was moving south. We just knew that February 13th in 1988 was when we were getting married, and everything else would be fine. As it turned out, we were lucky it worked out that way. And so I started my job at the Canadian Embassy, and my job was to help Canadian companies win contracts with the U.S. federal government under the newly inked Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. So that was how I started to learn my profession. People would call me up and ask about anything from international traffic in arms regulations, stuff that nobody was ever going to be able to solve their problem. The answer was no, forget it. And something as simple as the predecessor to how do I register in SAM, or what's a GSA schedule? And I didn't know from one day to the next whether this was something anybody could solve, something that a little research could solve, or a completely hopeless case. So every single day the phone would ring, and I had to know the answer. I didn't have a clue, and it had to be right.
That's a great way to learn.
It was. And I'm not somebody who enjoys researching just for the fun of it. I like to research and be somebody's superhero. So it was a great way to do that consulting thing that I had wanted to do. And I didn't have to sell, but sort of. It was interesting. I got to do what I call market evangelism. I spent my first wedding anniversary on Her Majesty's Not Especially Secret Service on a 14-stop roadshow going across Canada, talking to Canadian companies about how the trade agreements worked and the things they would need to do if they wanted to win contracts with the U.S. federal government fairly and under the agreements. I had to talk for 25 minutes and take 5 minutes worth of questions, which was perfect because I only knew 31 minutes worth of anything, but it was 31 minutes more than they did. But I avoided sales, which was great.
Right.
I had a lot of fun in the job. I hit a point. The job I had was never intended to be. I wasn't part of the career foreign service. There's all kinds of things about hierarchy and different kinds of jobs. But after 15 years of growing to be Canada's top expert in U.S. federal acquisition, as in terms of industry advice, I kind of ran out of creative room. It was time to move on. In 2003, I left the staff of the Canadian Embassy and launched my business,
Is
Summit
that when you
Insight.
made your multi-million-dollar mistake when you launched your business, not when you were at the Canadian Embassy?
Yes, I did not make the multi-million-dollar mistake at the Canadian Embassy.
Okay.
At the Canadian Embassy, I helped over 5,000 companies when they added it up, the total amount of sales that they credited our help with assisting them with was over $200 billion over 15 years. I thought I knew stuff. It turns out I didn't know nearly as much as I thought, and especially not about some really important stuff. So my business was kind of successful. When you first start a business, you're doing business with people you know, people you like, people who know you.
Why did you decide to leave and start a business? You just felt like you had.
Well, I think I wanted to be able to work more creatively and in more depth than I could have if I had stayed.
All right.
And I'd been really fortunate at the embassy. In some ways, I had maverick managers, people who gave me a lot of rope, let me do some really extraordinary and fun things. And I hit a point where I had realized that I'd just simply been lucky to have a string of maverick managers, but that wasn't necessarily going to happen all the time. And my ability to do more interesting and expansive creative things turned out to be really pretty limited. And the upside about running your own business is the world's your oyster. You can do all kinds of things. You got to take some risks and you got to invest and you got to do a lot of other things, but somebody also has to say yes. If your objective as a business owner includes to generate profit for some reason, then you also have to be able to clear your expenses. You have to be able to sell. And at the beginning, I was the only person in the Canadian government who did what I did. So Canadian government offices would hire me to do kind of some of the same stuff that I'd left.
Okay.
And my model, I thought that I knew that right away, right out of leaving the embassy, I didn't really have the expertise to advise American companies, but I figured Canadian companies would value the expertise they couldn't get from me working at the embassy anymore. Well, not so much. So they were the people that I was working with, the pool I knew how to fish in, were people who are used to getting services from the government for free. So working with individual companies was kind of hit or miss, but to be absolutely blunt, think about the kinds of things that most government contractors really want somebody to help them do. I knew from my time at the embassy that the thing people wanted most was they wanted you to give them a contract. Well, I couldn't do that. The second best thing, they wanted me to introduce them to somebody else who was going to give them a contract. That's work only they could do.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted someone to sell for them. Well, I wasn't going to do that. They wanted someone who could write proposals. I wouldn't write proposals if you paid me. It's not because proposals are not important. I'm not any good at them. Mm-hmm. So writing proposals, I wasn't going to do that, and I wasn't going to sell. And those are two big things you hire people to do. Now, so I loved making presentations and explaining how the federal market worked and all kinds of other stuff. And by the time I got to about 7 years after I started my company, I finally got past the "who do you think you are" demons and gathered together lots of useful stuff that I had learned not only over my time at the embassy, but then being in the trenches every day and running my own business. And so I wrote the first edition of my book, Government Contracts Made Easier. That it's easier because easy is fiction. And so that was one of my 2 procurement jokes. And so,
the link to get your book, Government Contracts Made Easier. And you also have a workbook that goes with it, right?
I do.
Really good book.
Thank you. Yeah. The first edition of the book, it was bringing together everything I'd learned up until about 2010. And at that point, by the time I got to kind of 2012, 2014, I could tell you anything you wanted to know about how the federal government does business. Anything at all, except for one little thing. How someone actually closed the business. It wasn't that I didn't want to tell you. I honestly didn't know, which didn't matter very much till the day that it really, really did. So my business had struggled, little contract here, little contract there. And then I landed what for me, for my business, was the big one. I was going to have work with 7 companies for a whole year and help them do their strategy. Yay. Their sales plan. I could hire somebody for help for that. And I was going to consult with them for a whole year. These companies were doing everything from, one had generators that could power a campus or a city block. Another one had waterless shampoo, perfect for hospitals beds. Another one had snap lock glass containers. Another one had uninterruptible power supplies. Another one had root canal equipment.
Totally different
dental
companies.
supplies. And so this was, but that was going to be all right. I had a buddy, I had known her about 10 years ago, my friend Eileen Kent. And so I said, Eileen, I need your help with this thing, the sales plan thing. She said, great, here's what it costs. I said, can I see it first? She said, nope. She said, nope. I said, nope. You mean I'm going to pay you thousands of dollars, sight unseen, and you're going to do the thing? She said, yep. I said, do me. Wow. And this was the best decision I ever made for more reasons than I realized at the time. So you ever have one of those contracts where you do lots of the heavy lifting up front and then it's just kind of smooth sailing for this was that. This seemed like this was that contract. I went, great. This was my contract for the whole year. And it was going to be regular income. How wonderful for any business owner, predictable income. Right. That felt so good. It felt so safe. And we got to the end of delivering the sales plans, providing the training for all these companies. And I said, okay, we're done. I'll see you next week. Make some calls. They said, wonderful. When are you making the introductions? I said, the what? The introductions. And I went, no. They said, yes. I went, no. I said, yep. And I went through shock and anger and denial and all the stages of grief. And it wasn't even a question of misunderstanding of scope of work. We're not even going to go there. At the end of the day, I had to take a deep breath and pull up my big girl socks and open the sales plan and pick up the phone. I was terrified.
Wow.
I only had 3 problems.
You had to make those introductions because these people were under contract with you. You could have refunded them and said, I'm not going to do it.
Not at this point. Not at this point. And so, I mean, I was on the hook for literally thousands of calls, hundreds of introductions for 7 companies for a whole year. Now, here were my problems. First, I had never done this before. I was terrified that everybody would think I was a big fat fraud. I'd written a book. How could I not know this?
Right.
Second, I have a graduate degree. I don't do sales. Yeah, that ship had sailed. But I really, in the words of the immortal Gene Kranz, mission controller, failure was not an option. This was my contract for the whole year. I had never let down a client before, and I wasn't going to do it now. So I picked up the phone and it was awful. Can you imagine me being lost for words? Yeah, right.
No.
I stammered and I didn't know what to say and I was awkward and they were kind. I was confused. They didn't mind these people I was calling. I thought, well, what am I so afraid of? Well, I thought, what's the worst thing that can happen? Somebody could yell at me. That happens. Someone snarled at me exactly once and said, don't ever call me again. I thought, all right, we paint that line in the sales plan gray. We don't call him again. But I'm calling public servants. I'm calling people who are here to serve me as a taxpayer. They're in these jobs because they want to serve. They have responsibility to serve. How bad could it really get? So call after call after call after call. I had a sales plan. This saved me. But I had a methodical way to at least find out something about people. But at the end of the day, I was dialing for dollars for endodontics.
Yeah.
I love it. And I hit the turning point when I was talking to Dr. Ned Robertson, the endodontist with the Indian Health Service in Penobscot, Maine. And this is about our third conversation. He was talking about his nephew who was going to be graduating from Georgetown Medical School. He was so excited. And what he was doing on his Tuesday off. You know what he was doing on his Tuesday off?
No.
Sewing curtains. Sewing curtains. And he said, oh, those guys from B&L Biotech, sure, no problem. Set up a call. And he hung up the phone. I went, that was it? That was all I had to do? Okay. I'm going to take a little break. I can do this again. And pick up the phone and dial again. And so this was a full year project. And at the end of this project, I thought, I am never going to do this again. I'm never going to do a project with this much reporting again, but I'm never going to tell a single soul I know. Wait a second. I cannot be the only person who has expertise and who struggles with this whole thing about sales. There have got to be other companies that a methodical way to do this and some support to stay in gear and keep doing it would make all the difference. I call up my friend Eileen. Eileen, can we do this again? She says, sure. And over the next 5 years, we ended up working with easy 50, 60 companies in that period of time and taking them through these steps. And some people nobody ever said it was a stupid approach. It didn't work. I did have some people who would say, this is tactically brilliant. I didn't do the work. I got to own that. I said, all right, well, how do we fix that part? And so over the last 3 years, I really wanted to figure this out. Because for somebody to hire me and not get the result they really wanted, that really bothered me. That was hitting my big not good enough button in a really curious way. And I piloted not 1, not 3, but 5 different programs. And at the end of that, I put them all back on the shelf and said, what did we learn from this? And we pulled out the missing piece, because the 3 things that people needed to do to be successful, they needed to understand the federal sales game, what it was that each people at each layer conceptually needed and cared about, so you could have some idea of where to start a conversation. They needed to get research done. They needed a plan. But they also needed to have whatever it took to stay engaged. And what was so scary about that? And figuring that out and being able to get people genuinely excited about what it means to build human connection. That understanding that art form and being able to teach that is now the core of my practice. And a lot of the other things from other parts of personal development and understanding human connection have come into play. So my toolkit for doing that is maybe 10% federal acquisition regulations and 90% understanding how to get past the things that stop us from connecting with each other as human beings who just happen to be in the federal arena together.
Wow. So you're saying that, why would you say then that it's a multi-million-dollar mistake?
Because failure to understand how to have a conversation with other people. I didn't know how to do that very well for my own business. I didn't know how to do that well enough to help somebody else. But my revenue for my company struggled and struggled and struggled. And I could have even just $100,000 of revenue for 10 years solid. I could have had more than that. You do the math. Yeah. The revenue that I could have been generating from my company, if only I had, instead of quailing from and running from the idea of what sales really was all about, if I had learned that art for my own company a lot sooner, my company would have been more profitable. And I can only begin to imagine the difference. I didn't even do that math, that difference I could have been making for companies who otherwise liked me, but I didn't have anything to offer because I couldn't tell them how to solve this one problem. So that was the multi-million-dollar mistake. And that was a hard piece of math to realize, but to just say, well, that's over. Look ahead. Now that I have mastered enough of this to almost feel like I'm at the starting line, it feels joyful and exciting. And it's really changing the groups and teams who come and work with me, because I've realized the particular approach that I take. It's one thing I haven't figured out is a methodical way to bring that and offer that in a structured way so people will do the work as individuals. The thing that I particularly, the point that I'm at now, I'm really having amazing success in working with small teams and individual companies because people support each other. There may be something, and you and I both know of great coaching programs where people are working together in pods or small groups. So there's a lot of juice in small groups. That part I haven't quite figured out. But you were asking me about the micro engagement piece. And so this is really cool. And I haven't really talked to anyone else about this. You think about I draw on some of the work of Brené Brown, and one of the elements that comes out of her earliest work has to do with foundations of how trust is built. And trust is built one small interaction at a time. You probably couldn't count the number of conversations you had with your financial advisor before you finally said yes, right?
Right. That's true.
Yeah. And so often in sales positions, we're hoping to make 3 phone calls and could they please buy? Right? And the only way we can keep showing up and having conversations with people is if we've chosen well. We can keep showing up with energy, determination, resilience. We're not going to get deterred by no, because what comes after no and no and no and no is now.
Yeah, so you're not at the right time. It's not necessarily me or you, the person, that has the product or service to sell. It's just not the right time, or there's could be numerous reasons, but we tell ourselves in our head that we make it all about us when it's not all about us.
No, so much is not. The one of the elements of trust that I like, Brené Brown's work at acronyms out to braving. And so boundaries, reliability, accountability, the vault, confidentiality, integrity, non-judgmentality, and the G, which I love, and I trip over this every day pretty much, generosity. What's the first thing you think, and the second, the third thing you think when somebody doesn't return your call?
They don't like me.
There you go. Keep going.
They don't want to talk to me. They don't like me. They must be mad at me. But I know that a lot of times when I didn't return someone's call when I was working for the Navy, it was just because it got buried in